Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the fifth and probably final meeting of the Hatfield Town Government Committee. For those in the audience and on TV land that don't know a little history, I'll give it to you. At the annual town meeting in May, the selectmen had an article to form this committee and explore the structure of changing the number of selectmen from 3 to 5. It took a while to get people appointed to it, not sure of the whole timeline. Our first meeting as a body of 3 was September 26th of this year. And at that meeting, we met each other and also elected officers of this committee. David Keir is the clerk, Chris Smith is a member, and I was elected chairman. My name is Larry Grossman. We met for the first time October 7th, and then subsequently have had a couple meetings after that, developing the report you see in front of you that we have copies on the table, and that for the residents will be available ideally after tonight at Town Hall on the table or at the clerk's office. I'm not sure where they'll be, the secretary's office maybe. But our charter was, as part of this article, was to explore the structure of the chief elected officials, review procedural methods to increase the Board of Selectmen from 3 to 5, and reflect findings in your report to the Board of Selectmen, which is due no later than December 2018, which is Saturday. So we're done early, and hopefully this report that we are going to present to the selectmen tonight will be sufficient for the job they asked us to do. What our final task we decided as a board was to have this public hearing where we would solicit further input from the residents now that we've completed this report, and that we would add it to the comments to the selectmen tonight and any other follow-up that they may offer us or ask us about. So just to go over without reading every page of this, I want to just review the process that at our first meeting, David came in with a report from the town of Duxbury, who had commissioned the Massachusetts Division of Local Services, Department of Revenue, to examine a lot of parts of their town government. And one of them, in fact, the number one item was to explore expanding the board. And it has some similarity in us, and others it's not relevant. But we decided to include that report in our final findings because it did address other governance issues that, in fact, even though we were charged with exploring 3 to 5, there are other very important issues in the Duxbury report that could be relevant to Town of Hatfield operation. And so we hope that by including this, that the selectmen will think about these issues, and maybe we'll be reconvening to explore some of those. So that's one of the main reasons why we included this. Now, the reason I said that the town of Duxbury report isn't 100% relevant to our problem or our situation is that they operate under what's called a town charter. And because of that, the process that they had going from 3 to 5 is more complicated and required an intervention by the state legislature, a so-called home rule petition, much like we used 20 years ago when we created the Department of Public Works. That required, because of the structure of taking away certain appointed and elected officials, it required intervention by the state to approve it. Duxbury had the same situation with their charter regarding the size of the select board. We in Hatfield operate under our bylaws, which are silent in areas of the size of the select board. So it reverts to Mass General Law, and which allows the select board to be from 3 to an unspecified upper limit, as I remember, chapter 41.
Section 20.
So with that in mind, we thought, well, this could be as easy as we thought it would be. And we subsequently had a meeting in Hadley who had gone through this procedure around 2001. And at that time, it really was very simple. They brought an article forward, which was even simpler than the model one we have in this report, but we also include Hadley's here. And to see if the town will vote to increase the Board of Selectmen from 3 to 5, and then carry this out. 2 additional members will be elected at the next election, 1 for 2 years, 1 for 3 years, and 1 for a term of 3 years, and hereafter for a term of 3 years. So it's staggered, and that's how you get 2 more members. It's just a logical way to get 2 more members. I'll go back to the meeting with Hadley, but after that meeting, with the permission of the Board of Selectmen, we approached our town council, Tom Mullen, who offices somewhere east of here. And he researched it further and confirmed, in fact, that the Hadley process serves as a model for what we do. They operate under a bylaw, town meeting form of government. So consequently, on page 3, above our signatures, you see the draft language for the required article that would take Hatfield from 3 to 5 members. The board shall be, I'll summarize the 3-4 paragraphs, shall be increased by 2 members. The candidate receiving the highest number of votes shall take the 3-year term. Once that has been filled, the candidate with the next highest vote shall take the first new position and take a 2-year term, and then the next one will fill the new position for a 1 year. So it's similar to Hadley, where you phase in number 4 and number 5. It's that simple. It requires a simple majority on the floor of town meeting. It could be done as early as the next special town meeting, or it could be done at the annual town meeting in the spring. If it's done before that meeting, if it's done in the winter at a special town meeting, we would actually be able to have an election for 5 selectmen in the spring. If it happens at the spring annual meeting, this process would happen at the next year, 2020. So that's the process, and it seems very straightforward. It's not complicated, involving the state legislature and waiting. This could happen immediately at town meeting. Now I'll go back just briefly to summarize what we met in Hadley with a fellow called John Allen, who was a selectman in Hadley around the time of this. I'm not sure if he was on the board at exactly this time, but he certainly was. And he was one of the prime movers to get their board from 5 to 3.
I mean 3 to 5.
Oh, from 3 to 5, sorry. And one of the biggest factors they discussed in Hadley prior to their special town meeting was that it was simply becoming complicated to operate under 3 members. They could not have subcommittees, technically 2 members, like our board. I can't discuss this at all with 1 individual member in private. We're required by open meeting law to have, whenever 2 or more are together, we have to post a meeting and do it in public. So this 5 membership totally changed how they operate. They have task forces, they have subcommittees, and he said it leads to a much more efficient operation. They have not only discussions outside the meeting, but they could do, if they wanted to go visit someone, 2 of them could go legally. And we can't do that with 3 members. If they had to go to Boston for something. And the second thing, which I think John Allen felt that was really the significant change in Hadley, was that it brought an opportunity for new blood and new names on the board. It would not be viewed as such an onerous task that 3 people are carrying the weight of the town. Now it's 5. There might be subcommittees as part of that 5. There might be tasks divided up. And in the end, it made it harder also for any one or two people to kind of power their agenda through at meetings and subsequently at town meeting. So it gives a more ecumenical approach to the management of the town. And he said that was a very positive thing, and 17 years later, they take it for granted. But he remembers very clearly how some of the factors were in Hadley, and you still hear about them at their elections. The old Hadley versus some of the younger people, some of the newer residents and all that. And this really kind of leveled it out in their select board operation. So that was our most important person we talked to, actually. As a result of that discussion and also other discussions among ourselves, we thought one of the best ways to present this report would be a series of questions and answers that people might have. And that's what's on page 4 and 5 here. And I think these are the kind of questions that people might ask now at the public hearing, or they might ask at the town meeting where this would be voted on, or at a selectmen meeting where it might be discussed. So I don't know, I can go quickly, 3, 4, 5, there's only 7 questions and answers. One thing that we've heard was 2 more members, it's going to cost so much more money. Well, I hate to say it, but the selectmen only get $2,000. And so adding 2 of them is cost us $4,000, which Chris did the calculation. On our $12 million budget, it amounts to a 0.00034% increase. So that is not a material amount of money. And so I don't think the money is an issue. Another question came up that, well, yeah, but 5 members, they're all gonna, now the meetings are gonna, they're long enough where they're gonna be longer because everyone's gonna have to have their say. Well, what happened in Hadley and what people we've talked to about other boards in this town, that's not really the issue. The issue is more that the chairman has to manage the meeting. It doesn't really matter if there's 3 or 10. And it turns out that in many cases, like I mentioned, that we could have subcommittees, much like the school committee does, and they are able to do the preliminary work prior to the meeting of the board, and it actually could take less time. Will it be difficult to get residents to volunteer for office? This I hear all the time. Well, we're not going to have any opponents. How are we going to fill 5? We have trouble filling 3. The fact is we haven't had an unopposed selectman race in a while. And in fact, most of the policy-making boards in this town, there's been a competitive election. And I think we're also finding newer residents and younger residents. So this gives an opportunity for 2 more slots on the select board. The 4th point I made was, or we made as a question and answer was, what about open meeting law? And actually this should be number 1. Because a 3-member board many times can simply not take care of their business. We've had selectmen in the past that have conflicts with public safety. They have to be excluded from the board. That means you only have 2 people making these decisions. It would be much nicer to have 4. And you guys interrupt me if I'm missing some things too.
Right.
Now this one I thought was a really eye-opener, and I don't remember if it was Dave or Chris, and we said like, well, what about the other boards? Aren't people going to say, well, why do you need 5-member boards? We could have 3-member boards. So let's make a list. What's 5 members? This is a list of 20 committees in Hatfield that are 5 members.
Or more than 5 members.
Or more than 5 members, and they're the major policy boards of this town. So if this is the case, school committee, finance committee, board of health, capital planning, RAC, council on aging, planning board, ZBA, housing, open space, conservation, energy, cable advisory. If that's the case for these boards, certainly the executive board, there could be an argument made that that should be 5. And then we said a question might be, well, why now? You know, the classic Hatfield bromide that I hear at every town meeting, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, the fact is, it is broke. We've, in our work on many things, we've seen it is broke. We need more voices. We need more diversity in thinking. We need a chance to hear more new ideas.
And one of the big complaints when we were doing the whole collector treasurer, do we appoint or elect or that kind of stuff, a lot of the people were like, well, felt like the board of selectmen at the time when some of those things happened didn't make good choices. Well, if you have 5 people now, maybe that's a better chance to make better choices instead of 3 people making choices. And on top of that, since we have done that, that's 2 more people that the Board of Selectmen has to manage, has to be overseeing, has to pay attention to. Not that they didn't before, but they were elected people before, now they're appointed people, and thus they really have to be paying attention to that because they don't have that position until the next election. So the oversight from the Board of Selectmen for those people is key. And we all know with our financial situation that oversight about all that kind of stuff right now is a major issue in this town, and 5 people doing it versus 3 probably is a better idea.
And the only other question and answer we had were people are saying, well, why Hatfield? What about, maybe no one else has 5 members? Well, Dave made a whole list here. He got some of this information from local services and Marlene. So you'll see there's many towns with 5 and there's many with 3, but in the Duxbury report, that was Plymouth County, there's the same kind of list. It's not that it's the strangest thing in the world. So that was it. Our group was not partisan. We didn't have an agenda. I think at the end, well, certainly I went into it thinking I like more representation. This is actually an article that I've had at town meeting in the past, but I think this research has really solidified my view that this is a good thing for town of Hatfield. And I don't know I can't speak for the other 2, but that's it. And our role also wasn't to lobby or advocate or anything like that. We were just going to produce this report. But as a voter in Hatfield, as a resident, I liked what I discovered.
And there are no recommendations in here, if you look at it. There's no recommendations coming forth from the 3 of us to say that we think they should or we think they shouldn't, or this is simply now, this will be put on the Board of Selectmen, and if they decide to put the article on the town meeting warrant, then they decide to put the article on the town meeting warrant. It'll be totally up to them. But I as a resident, I think it would be a good idea at some point, if not as soon as possible, at least within the next year, to be looking at increasing the board from 3 to 5. For anybody who watches the meetings now, we need some more people with some to try to balance off what's going on with the Board of Selectmen right now.
Yeah, I just echo what Larry and David have said. And again, this isn't a partisan report. This is basically, we looked at Hadley, we looked at, is this a common situation in other towns? With the role currently and the strictures of open meeting law, maybe it's worth a consideration. Look at this more efficiently. Certainly, if we look at school committee, again, the largest piece of the pie, they have 5 members. They do use subcommittee. Their meetings don't really go much longer than select board meetings. And I think that might be a boost. Having 5 members, the other thing too, and again, if you look at the Q&A that we pointed out, is that most of our candidates who have run for select board are retired individuals because there's an inordinate amount of time each of them becomes liaisons to other boards and committees. So they may be dividing up 30 town boards and committees. They have to now divide that 3 ways. Well, if you divide it 5, there's less work. And then so younger folk, which have not come have made run for selectmen may say, well, maybe it isn't so overwhelming. Maybe, many hands make light work, and we'll see new faces.
We've
But-
certainly seen that on the school committee in the last few years.
Yeah, we have.
A lot of younger parents.
Yeah, the two women, Heather and,
That's right. That are now on the school committee that have brought some fresh perspective and somebody who's a little younger than the three of us, anyways.
Good point.
Okay.
Does the chair want to open it to the
Yeah,
floor?
so that's our somewhat lengthy preface and history. This, as I said, is our final meeting, probably. I think at 6 o'clock we're going to recess, where we'll rejoin the selectmen at 6:30, present this report officially, and then we'll probably be dissolved. So, but as part of this,
Yes.
we wanted to open it up to the public. If you have further questions, if you want to reinforce anything, or if you have a contrary idea of something, let's hear it.
Or anything we missed.
Maybe we missed something.
That's really important.
I live over at Capel One and I'm retired, and before I moved over to Hatfield, and when I moved over to Hatfield, I was in charge of a school in a local area here in custodial and maintenance. And I know when we made up our budget for our school, we started it in October, and we got together with everybody at the school on what they wanted, what they wanted in their department and everything like that. And by December, after having all these meetings and everything with our staff and our principal and everything, we went before the school board and everything and presented our budget to them, and we had all this stuff done by December, and we were finished by December on what we to do, and we had plenty of suggestions on what we did. And in my case, my school was 48,000 square feet, and I had wall-to-wall carpet in all my classrooms. So one of my suggestions all the time was every 2 years I would request another 5 vacuum cleaners or whatever to do our work every day, and shampoos and everything like that. And luckily the people where I worked at, the town people, were very supportive of us and gave us basically what we needed to run our school efficiently with it and everything, and because it's like anything else, your schools, your municipal buildings, everything it's like a house or your car. Certain things have to be done to it every year or so often to maintain the thing there, so it won't break down and cost you more money.
Can I ask you a
Sometimes
question?
I watch selectmen's meetings sometimes there, and they have 3 people and they can't agree with it. Well, okay, we'll postpone it to the next month or whatever, or something like that. Well, if you had 5 people there, you would have more ideas and everything like that, and hopefully you wouldn't get into roadblocks like that. So
Well, I think
hopefully,
you actually hit on the point that I should have related more clearly in Hadley, which that kind of work could often be done offline.
Right.
Because you got 3 of them that might be on a subcommittee.
Right, right.
Or 2 of them, 2 would be on a subcommittee. So when it comes to the meeting, there shouldn't be a roadblock. You've already done a lot of the preliminary work.
and most of it now.
And I think that you can't do that with 3. You've seen it, that's what Dave was mentioning. You start watching the meetings, you realize
Right.
well, we'll take care of it at the next meeting or something. So that's what takes a lot of time.
Right, right.
Other questions? Thoughts? All right.
Mike, any?
I have a couple of thoughts.
Okay.
First of all, comment, I think you guys have done really well, and you ought to be applauded for doing what you've done over the course of the last few months and preparing a report to the selectmen. And it'd be interesting to see how they receive this in a few minutes, I guess. A couple of things. I had wondered in terms of the process for going from 3 to 5. whether you had given any thought or whether in your research have come across any communities like Hadley or some of the others in Western Mass that have gone from 3 to 5. Have they changed their bylaws? Larry, you said that our bylaws at this point are silent. They don't deal with the number of selectmen. Is that something that you guys have thought of at all? Would it make sense for the community to have a bylaw that says that Hatfield should have a minimum of 5 or whatever? That's just, you know, one of my thoughts. And if that were the case, does that complicate a change from that number in terms of process, if ever there was a change going forward? Would that kick in the issue of the requirement that you would end up having to go through the special article, the petition to the state, whatever process, if we did have such a bylaw? So that was.
So if this was to pass at town meeting, maybe a push would be made to change the bylaws at that point. Or do you think it should, or do you think the bylaw should be changed first, which would then force this to happen?
Yeah, I'm not making a recommendation at all, but it would, I'm just wondering about, would it make sense going forward for the community to have a bylaw?
But why?
That
Our
dictates-
bylaws don't cover so much.
Right.
They're so quiet about membership, and why would we introduce that? But maybe in the future, they'd want to change to 7, or back to 3, or
Right.
I don't know. Why would, we could, I don't think Hadley made any change other than that article.
They didn't.
Yeah.
And maybe just to address that going back, it's interesting how our bylaw is silent on so many things. They talk about, there's 3 paragraphs on the finance committee, right? But nothing about planning board, nothing about conservation, nothing about assessing, nothing about selectmen. The bylaws seem to only talk about specific, open space has something about it, but it's very, it's sort of, it'll tell you what, it used to say what side of the street you would walk your horse, but I think we
they
got rid of
that.
those.
I'm not advocating for this. I'm just saying, is this an issue that you guys
No.
considered at all and discussed at all?
No, because
Okay.
really
All right.
what you're hinting at, or what this would lead to, is kind of what Duxbury confronted. They realized they wanted a lot of governance changes. So maybe down the road, we would have a government committee like ours that would address a bylaw modification. Or really, maybe we'd want a town charter.
Right.
But this step stands on its own. I don't think we would start making bylaw changes. And when your bylaw is silent, it falls to the Massachusetts general law. And that was why it's so easy to make the change, Chapter 41.
Okay, and that brings me to my next comment. In here, in your report, it quotes the town of Duxbury study report that was prepared by the DLS. And
which
you've
is
got
attached-
a specific quote in here.
Which is
that-
attached to the back in case you haven't seen it.
Yeah, I saw that. That literally says state law precludes making such a change solely through a town meeting vote.
That was back when they did that. It has been changed since.
Okay, well, that's my point. If this is going to be handed out to the general public at some point, speaking as a layperson, having going through this for the first time, I would see that explicit quotation from a Duxbury report saying that state law says that you cannot do it solely through a town meeting.
Because of their charter.
Charter.
Well,
Yeah.
I know you're explaining that to us now, but
Right.
it might make sense for you to have something from our town council.
Well, we have
That's-
his article. But more than important,
Well, you
this
don't have it in
isn't-
his article. It doesn't
this really-
say that this is his article.
Yes, it does. That was we have his article that it would affect this change on page 3.
But
That's what required. Another thing I should clarify, this is not, it's a public document because we're a public board. This is not necessarily the document that voters will get prior to town meeting. The selectmen will decide, they may do a simple question and answer. They won't include the Duxbury report. They won't include the list of towns and all of this stuff. It could be a very simple 1 or 2 page question and answer. So our report has all this stuff because it reflects our work product that we're turning over to the selectmen tonight.
Right.
And we shared it with you because it's a public document.
yeah, I understand that.
So,
All I'm saying is that reading it as a public document, as a taxpayer for the first time, I see a specific quote that says you cannot do this only through a town meeting for a town that you are using kind of as an example because you've included
the
there.
first paragraph, the bottom paragraph on the first page says, Duxbury has a much larger population, it also has a town charter. So it was a different animal.
Right.
Maybe this, just to make it simpler. This report is based on the charter the selectmen gave us. And the specific purpose is, reflected in the article, but the task is to explore the structure of the chief elected officials, review the procedural methods to increase the board from 3 to 5, reflect your findings in your report. We're giving a research, exploration of options and process, starting on page 1 through page 2. When we quote the Duxbury study, we follow in the next paragraph, because Hatfield underlined does not have a town charter, our bylaws are silent as to the number of members of the select board. The committee was unclear as to the legal steps necessary, receiving a response from town council. As we go through the report, we get that response on page 3, and the town council says, lo and behold, what you have discovered was true for Hadley is also true for Hatfield.
Christopher, I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Okay.
All I'm saying is that
This is all this
there's
is.
not a sentence in here that says exactly what you just said. That town council says that Hatfield does not require that lengthy process because it does not have a
Well, he
charter.
does. It's Attorney Tom Miller had a number of email and telephone exchanges regarding the process Hatfield would have to undergo.
I mean,
It seems
it's
like we're
fine.
splitting hairs over some language, but it's very clear. All it is this article. I mean, the selectmen will have a decision to market this, to explain it to the taxpayers, the voters, and Duxbury may not even come up in the discussion.
But we needed to memorialize that we did go through that. We looked at a variety of sources, and including town council.
Okay.
Another-
The other thought I have is this, even though you guys are saying that your goal was just to explore the structure of elected officials and come back with a report on the process for making a change. And I want to qualify this in that I too support and would support on town meeting floor a change from 3 to 5. But the report, to me, and what you said tonight as a committee, is biased towards going to 5.
We said we came to that
Okay?
conclusion.
You're not.
We're done with our work.
Right, you are not providing a neutral report on the process for going from 3 to 5.
Totally with that.
Okay.
I totally disagree with that. The report is totally neutral. We tried to list cons and pros. The biggest con we heard about were the meetings were going to take longer and it's going to cost more. And we explained those. In terms of the process, it's not us, it's not you, it's not the Board of Selectmen. It's the Mass General Law rules us, and it's an article that the town council wrote.
You know,
So I don't know, I mean, we're not, and as I said in my remarks, I was generally in favor of 5 always, before we even formed this committee, before I was even appointed to this committee. But as a result of doing this work, I'm now convinced, and I said personally, David said the same thing, and I'm sure Chris would join in, we've come to see that this is almost a no-brainer. This is simple. That it,
You're making a recommendation to go to 5.
no, our report does not have a recommendation.
Well, your delivery of the report to the general public tonight basically says that.
I said that as a voter,
didn't say
as a
that.
resident, I said, I will come to, and actually, tell me one thing. What difference does it make if I have a view now, after we've done this work? I'm allowed to have a view. What difference does it make? Is it negate the town meeting article? Does it negate the value of 5 members?
No, it's just that I believe the expectation of the selectmen was that you were just going to provide a report on the process from moving to 3 to 5.
Isn't that what,
Not-
isn't that here?
Well, no, it says to explore the structure.
Right.
That gives you a lot of latitude, Michael. And that's what with this, I think,
All right, well-
if you read this report, and I have to agree with Larry and David, our mission, we were very clear. We did not want to show, we wanted to be as objective. And tonight, quite frankly, we would love to hear anything on the, especially on the Q&A part. Is there something we missed? Because we wanted to provide, if there are more cons, if there's more reasons, we'd love to hear them. That oh no, you're better off with 3 because, you fill in the blank.
I think on top, Michael, I thank you for all your comments tonight, because that's why we had this public forum, so people could share how they feel. Just because we may differ in how we feel about things, it's still important that we have this discussion and that we have this opportunity to have the dialogue. And I think it's important. And I just wanted to say that, whether I agree or disagree with it, I'm glad you came, because I value hearing some of the things that you have to say, about lots of different things in town. But one other sort of historical point that we sort of discovered, and Chris mentioned it a number of times at our meetings, is in his role as a member of the Board of Assessors over the years, way back in the history someplace, there is some evidence that Hatfield did have 5 select board members at different times.
Well, we
right.
started with 5.
Exactly, yeah,
Right.
because
Started with 5.
he found documents that where 5 people would have signed as members of the Board of Selectmen. So it's not that Hatfield doesn't have that history either of having had 5 at different times.
There was.
Why they went from 5 to 3 whenever
we
they did,
don't know.
we don't know.
Relevant.
It's not really that relevant, but
We didn't have John Novak recording the meeting when they went from 5 to 3.
Right.
Anyways.
But there was for those, just to do a quick, when I first came to town in 74, 75 in there, the bridge was just closed that went across by Ryan's, which is now B&B's. And on that bridge was a plaque, and it said, dedicated by the Board of Selectmen, and there were 5 names. And I kind of thought, oh. And when I went to a select board meeting, I said, where are the other 2? But, at some point it dropped to 3. Maybe it was because of World War I, we don't know. Or it was Civil War, who knows? But we batted this around, I brought it up, but the group, we came to the conclusion, how is that relevant to this argument today? And as we look at other towns changing from 3 to 5, I think the impetus for doing so is the amount of work. And as I touch back here, one of the things we see even in our own history of who runs for the Board of Selectmen generally are retired individuals. And I just look at,
That's not necessarily the case.
but it has been in the last few cycles. And I wonder, it may be not that I'm wrong, but it seems to be there's a workload involved that maybe, again, with 5 people, could be easier to deal with. And again, touching back on a lot of insight that David gave us about the school committee runs and how they have a tremendous workload as well. And by divvying up the work in pairs and so on and doing research, they can come to their meetings, give
I
report
want to ask
and
you a
so on.
question, another question. If it's so, if the conclusion is so obvious, and you've countered a bunch of questions here that would be considered, I guess, cons potentially, then why still is the greater majority, far the greater majority of communities in Western Massachusetts, why do they still have 3 members of their board?
We don't know. We didn't research it. A lot of them don't have, most of them don't have an independent school in their district. Their budget
Right.
isn't the kind of proportions ours manage.
Some of them are substantially larger than
Some
Hatfield.
are.
Oh,
But they may-
absolutely. Yep.
I mean,
No,
to
no question.
the tune of 3 or 4 times.
Throughout the Commonwealth.
And those do have their own high schools.
One of the
So-
things I didn't do, and I probably should have, is during the course. My brother is the chair of the Board of Selectmen in Berniston, and I never even thought to say, "Have you guys ever considered changing from 3 to 5?" But we did see recently another change in government. Amherst has changed their government. They've gone from that 62-night town meeting that went over the course of 3 or 4 months to now having a town council, right? And that kind
And the
of stuff.
population
And the
didn't increase.
population, so that was, I'm sure that was a drastic change for the way Amherst has always run their stuff. And there are somebody else in the last few years I remember changed. Town of
East Hampton.
Greenfield. The town of Greenfield used to have an open town, actually a representative town meeting years ago, and when they went to the town council form of government, now they've changed to a city, even though I don't think anybody knows that, but they're still doing their town council with a mayor now.
Right, right.
So I think there are some cities and towns around with recent historical past that have looked at their town government and looked at different ways of doing things. And I think it's just time. I think it's like anything else. I think you should look at those kinds of things every few years and look at it. You know, is it right that there's 5 members of the finance committee? Maybe we should have 7. Is it right that there's 7 members of the Council on Aging, and maybe we should only have 5? I don't know. But I think it's an important thing to look at.
Is it right that we have a board of selectmen and not a town council?
There you go.
Maybe.
Yeah.
That's-
I wondered whether that crossed your mind at all, but that was outside the scope. That's outside the scope.
Yeah, exactly.
That's some of the stuff that Duxbury deliberated about,
Right.
that there were recommendations for operational
Should
changes.
we have a town manager instead of a town administrator?
Yeah.
Which are 2 different things. So there's lots of things that we could consider here for this town as far as how we govern things.
But this is what we were charged to look with.
Right.
Right.
I mean, I'm curious, do you have any cons on this that we could talk about? Or are there any, other than just saying that,
Or pros.
Yeah.
Yeah.
what are
Things
there
that-
cons that we should have looked
Questions
at? or-
we didn't deal with on our Q&A. We'd be curious. Anybody? As you look at it, things that, when you think of changing from 3 to 5, that may cross your mind. We're going to need to.
I find that over the years, your cities and towns with these new state and federal laws and everything, you have to have more qualified people and everything to run your towns now, to be on top of all your new laws and everything like that, so, you know.
Actually, the complexity came up too, that it's really, we're basically running a $12 million company with 3 volunteers that get $6,000 salary total. And with the complexity, and so fortunately we have a town administrator, but like Mike brought up, he said maybe in the future this would be a town manager type role or something. But we're not dealing, right now we're dealing with, maybe we can make this work a little better by going from 3 to 5, and maybe that's our first step.
Right.
See, Larry, you're making a recommendation.
Yeah, well,
Maybe.
I said
maybe.
That's not what you were charged to do. That was my initial point. And I'm right with you.
What is your
Believe
point?
me. I'm right with all of you in terms of that move. But my point here was that your delivery of this report tonight
Does that
clearly
negate?
is biased towards moving.
We
from 3 to
admitted at the
5.
stop that at the end of our process, we came to the conclusion that it makes a lot of sense.
I know.
So what is your point? Did we negate any value of this by having a personal opinion? Why would you raise this?
But we don't formally, as our charter says.
A vote directs the selectmen to do anything. They asked us to make a report, and we have a report.
But you also said that they didn't ask you to make a recommendation, and you are making a recommendation.
We made there's no recommendation in the report, and I'm not really sure.
Only in a public forum, like anybody else could make a recommendation.
Right. I mean, you're just making an issue where there isn't one. To me, it reminds me of so much where you've got a solution, but there's no problem. In other words, it's just making seem like something's wrong, and there's nothing wrong, really. So.
Okay, we need to.
But anyway, what we're going to do formally is we're going to recess this meeting, and then we resume when the selectmen invite us to present this report. So it's one continuous meeting on our
We
record.
could meet in the back and just
Yeah.
do our minutes and be done.
Yeah, we have, oh, that's right. We actually remain in public because we do have 2 sets of meetings to approve, minute notes.
One or two?
One and then this.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Very
So
good.
thank you for coming. and
Right. Don't want to wreck the thing.
That's it. Thank you for coming. This
Yes.
probably ends our public side of this committee's task. And we'll see how the selectmen will have this report tonight and see what the next steps are. Thank you all for coming.
Very helpful. Appreciate it.